I want to thank you all for coming. This is actually a kind of a special talk for me. You'll notice the dates up there. On the 8th, I had to say goodbye to a very good friend of mine. This little guy I adopted about 2 years ago from my neighbors. Their daughter was making his household environment a little hostile, and they noticed I only had one dog, the boxer. And they came over to me and asked if I'd help them out. And I said, I'm not taking your 2-year-old, I'll take the dog. And so I had 2 dogs for a while. He got sick very suddenly, and I had to put him to sleep on Friday before I got on the plane Monday to come here. Saturday, sorry. Got on the plane Monday to come here. I had been to the vet and found out my baby on the right, who I got in 2011, has cancer or something like that. She's lost a terrible amount of weight, and she's really just skin over bones. I have people sitting with her until I can get home. I'm told she will hold on until I get back. I got Shadow as part of my recovery from alcoholism. And this is my PSA. My name is Ray, and I'm a recovering alcoholic. I know that there's lots of drinking in information security. And I remember before I got arrested, I would go to the liquor store and think, I'm never going to drink again, and I'd be buying liquor, okay? So if you're one of those people that wonders, I remember then, I was like, what's this like? Does anybody think like this? Yeah, they do. And so if you want to talk to somebody, come talk to me. I've been there. You may ask yourself, what am I doing starting with dogs dying and alcoholism? The theme of this talk really is resilience, and you'll see why as we go along. So, title of the talk is How Hackers Helping the Helpers. Cybersecurity is volunteer public service. I will tell you there are no packets in this. There's no math, no packets in this presentation. I love packets. I have lots of certs. My favorite class is the packet analysis class of SANS. I love that stuff, but this is not what that's about. This is about putting that information to use to help our fellow people. So I have an agenda, and I'm going to try and watch the time. First, or most importantly, not first, I want to inform you of a cool project that may be coming to your area. And I know that sounds like a commercial on Fox News or CNN for those of you that watch it. And it may take a while to get to your area, but it's really important for me to tell you because I've been speaking with sort of high-level executives in government. I talked to the National Governors Association back in June to their 5th annual cybersecurity symposium about the program I'm going to tell you about. I was on the stage with Wisconsin and Ohio, who are also doing similar programs. So the fact is that this kind of program is getting publicity. And I know of other states where it's happening. There are going to be high-level government officials that think they know what the hell they're talking about. They're going to come to people like you and say, hey, will you do this job? So I want to make sure that you hear it from me because we have a program that's been going on for a little while. And also this program, you know how any program starts with a single person sort of driving it and what goes on in their head kind of rules what gets done. And then after a while, there are more rules. There's formality and processes that come in around it. And that's what's happening with this organization. So I want to let you know what went on in the head of the crazy person that kind of helped start this. I will try to dispel some myths about cybersecurity career planning because I'm an old guy and I occasionally get questions about that. How did you get into cybersecurity? Trust me, you don't want to follow my path, just like most of the other old people around here, but we'll talk about that. And mostly, I want to inspire you to do something. I've had caffeine, it's 10 o'clock in the morning, you all ought to have energy, so yes, right. So get out your planning papers and make plans. And then you can disappoint yourself this afternoon when your caffeine runs out. All right. So the caveats on career planning. Some of you probably saw this. I don't know if am I going to work? Oh, let's see. No, okay, my pointer's not going to work. This Howard Flake is one of the old masters of cybersecurity, and his point is well taken. Anybody that is successful in cybersecurity at this time, you know, if you've been in the industry, if you've been around for 50 years, there was no cybersecurity back then. So you got here by doing something that can't be described as a cybersecurity career path. So if you go up to people and ask them how you got where you are, they're going to tell you a story that can't be repeated. The thing that is true over on the right is, and this is so true and so disappointing for many of us, that cybersecurity is not about malware analysis. It's more about it says managing people who are not in your control. I think a lot about parenting. It's learning to influence people. So I'm gonna take this and I'm gonna tell you how I got started because people ask, and there are some interesting things about it. But I want to give you some real life career advice. If you come to me and you ask, how can I get into cybersecurity? This is what I'm going to say. It is walk through the next door, be a friend. I was going to put make friends, but sometimes you can't make friends. I mean, sometimes people are just assholes or unpleasant, and it's difficult, right? People are different, and you don't have to get along with everybody, but you can try to be a friend. You want to make friends? You have to be a friend, right? So practice that. Even if it doesn't work, you have to have that skill or you won't be successful. And then if you can find a way to contribute, and I will go through what I did to do this, you can find a way to contribute, do that. If you can't, at least learn something. And I was thinking whether this would be a good guide to dating and romantic relationships. You can puzzle over that. I think there's some pros and cons, but we'll talk about that after. But the thing on the right, I mean, I know this sounds hokey, but it is a fact that unless you are in the category of Dunning-Kruger people, and go look up Dunning-Kruger, but unless you're in that special category, you really are braver than you believe, stronger than you seem, and smarter than you think. There's data to show this. You can do more than you think. The thing that holds you back is fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and sometimes alcohol. But, we'll talk about that. All right? So the dangerous thing, the scary thing, cybersecurity is people. This is Soylent Green reference here too, with the side of packets. So this is the part where this is my how it started slide. I'll tell you how I got into cybersecurity. If you want to follow my real career path, first, be uncertain about what you want to major in undergraduate school. Get told by your fraternity brother that chemistry is boring and you won't make much money, but you can do chemistry in chemical engineering and you'll make more money. So I got my degree in chemical engineering. I went and got a PhD at Purdue. The key is when you go get that PhD at Purdue, you should do it at the time when Al Gore is inventing the internet, and the internet is just coming to Purdue. So when the graduate students stay on campus when all the undergraduate students go away, and 1 year, when the undergraduates went away, they installed a network of VAXs in the electrical engineering department and terminals all over the campus. And that was the year after I had gotten my master's degree and paid $150 for somebody to type my thesis on like 100% cotton paper or something, whatever the requirement was. And when they put the VAXs in, we had access to typesetting. And they did, the school did allow that you didn't have to use 100% cotton paper anymore. And even then you could put it in the printer. So I learned typesetting on the VAX. That was the way that I learned computers. I wanted to save $100 printing my PhD thesis. So, adapt to the technology that's available to you. I got my first job at a company called Syntex. Some of you have probably heard of oral contraceptives and the sexual revolution. They were involved in that. They put out the first oral contraceptive back in the 50s. They also did a drug called naproxen, which some of you take. Naproxen sodium, it's generic now. They never followed up on that, so they got bought by Roche. And the site of Syntex Pharmaceuticals, the address is 3401 Hillview Avenue. Anybody happen to know what's at 3401 Hillview Avenue in Palo Alto, California? VMware headquarters is there now, and it's right across the street from the Xerox Palo Alto Research Center, where the windowing mouse system was invented. So it's an amazing time to be out in Palo Alto, but I was working in pharmaceuticals. So at the time, though, we started putting in a network. So we started playing around with AppleTalk. It was back when TCP/IP wasn't quite going yet. So I got involved peripherally with a lot of technology out in California. California was too expensive to live. I had 3 kids, and I was never going to be able to afford a house. So I moved back to the Midwest to the Upjohn Company and worked in animal health for a while. And I will tell you, I've had ivermectin in my refrigerator for years. None of us ever thought about eating it. We used it on the horses. But I did work for Pfizer, and some of my friends were involved in creating the vaccines. So I'll refer to that again later. At Pfizer, there was a disturbance in the force. They decided to gather. Some of you have heard of shadow IT. There was a time when they decided to pull all the shadow IT into corporate IT. And then, of course, all the people that have used shadow IT are suffering. So they create more shadow IT. So I figured out how to be on the interface. So this is a place where I walked through the door and tried to figure out what was on the other side of the door. I had skills on both sides. I can spell R&D and I can spell IT. So I worked on the interface between R&D and IT. I was never a great scientist, but I was the best damn scientist that would go to IT meetings with the IT department and say, this is what discovery scientists need. This is what our medicinal chemists need. And they could believe me. Similarly, I could come back to the IT department. I can say, look, I know it's inconvenient for you, but this is how these things fit in the overall picture. So if you can know both sides, you can make a difference in the world. Just as an example, everybody that is in this room that dances ballet, please raise your hand. Really? No? None? Okay, I can say that I'm probably the best dancer in my hacking community because I take adult ballet classes. I don't do very much. I can't hit a pirouette yet, but you don't have to be very good to cross over into another area and bring them up to speed in your area. And I do talk to my ballet. I work with little kids, and we talk about things like fact checking and how you know what you know. That's cybersecurity, right? Availability and integrity. So I went on. I assisted my employer with their downsizing activity, retrained, took some SANS courses. And I got valuable there. I found a way to contribute. That was back when you could do work study cheap. So I think I got probably a dozen certs. I worked for SANS. I got hired. I learned enough cybersecurity to tweak useful things. And I got hired at Purdue University to teach at a regional campus to teach cybersecurity. I've never worked as a SOC analyst, but I know some things and I can inspire people to learn. So I taught at a regional campus of Purdue. Stephen Northcutt from SANS, most of you know who SANS is. Stephen called me, he wanted to start a master's program. And I had a PhD, I've been a teacher. So I had, you get letters after your name and you become useful. Kind of weird. So I helped start the master's program. Once I got accreditation, they didn't need me anymore. So I went around looking for something else to do. And there was a bunch of hoodlums in Michigan, or nice people in Michigan who knew cybersecurity. Some other hackers like me who loved doing packets and who were also trying to figure out how to contribute back to the community. And I got hooked up with them. So that's what I'm going to talk to you about. You can see that the road that I followed was not a straight one. So signs about working in a cybersecurity career, that's like my advice. So that's my how it started slide. That's what I thought cybersecurity would be about. However, this is more what it's like these days. The stuff's on fire. Actually, there was a different S word used. But how many of you heard of I Am the Cavalry? Josh Corman. I did a talk. Yeah, Josh is great at getting people together to do the right thing that needs to be done without official sanction, and then getting official sanction as needed. That's what we're doing with the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. And this is what I'm doing. Dance like no one's watching well in a ballet studio, we close the doors, Love like you've never been hurt. I gave you romantic advice. Make friends like there will be supply chain or social infrastructure collapse, and you have to rely on each other for basic survival. The first slide I showed you is the collapse of my social infrastructure. That's my family. So again, the theme of this is resilience. What are you going to do to make sure that you're going to be okay when your supporting infrastructure, whether it's social infrastructure, whether it's your ability to buy a hamburger because JBS, the meat packing got hacked, or fill up your car? Think about it. If we lost electricity here in Deadwood and we're without electricity for a couple of weeks, you don't have gas in your car. I don't have a car here. I'm stuck. I didn't bring two weeks of food, So think about we start thinking about these things. And in fact, this is what life is like now. We got ransomware closing schools. That's pretty awful. I mean, schools typically do not have a large security team to fix this stuff. So you end up with kids at home. And you know what happens when kids are at home? Their parents have to be at home, or their parents are inconvenienced. And so the thing that I'm looking at in terms of cybersecurity is individual citizens. Because you break up the social infrastructure, it's not even worth talking about everything else. Remember 9/11, first responders. They had a hard time. Some first responders went and took care of their families. Go figure. That's the most important thing to them. So if we're in cybersecurity, we have to think about not just what's the most important thing to our companies. I mean, we work for our companies, and I hope that you all do the right thing by your companies. But if our companies survive and our neighbors don't, we're in big, deep doo-doo. So this is where we are as a society. Back in 2010, there was a governor of the state of Michigan named Rick Snyder. Some of you heard about him from other things. I don't want to talk about those things. He was good at cybersecurity, okay? There was a bunch of, admittedly, a group of old white guys, but that's all there were at the time. The CTO, the CIO, the CSO, the governor, they all had this idea that we could do something about this. So to give you some context, in 2010, the kind of things we were thinking about were the 9/11 attacks. The 9/11 attacks most of you were alive then. You remember there was a gut punch. That was huge. To find out that the United States was vulnerable, that was like a total mindset change for a lot of people. The next thing that I remember, some of you may not remember, I was at Cedar Point, America's roller coast, when the Northeast power outage happened. And I was standing by the tallest roller coaster on the site at that time. And it stopped when the train was like just about to go over the top hill. And they had to walk those people down the tallest hill from that roller coaster. It turns out that the power outage was from a squirrel. So it was not a nation state attack, but the effect was the same. We're vulnerable. Lastly, of the big events that led up to how people were feeling in 2010, you probably remember or some of you will remember the Aurora generator test, where they hauled a generator to Idaho and blew it up with a few commands over a network. And that scared people, to let people know that the electric grid was vulnerable. And you blow up a generator, it's going to take some years to fix. And that was back before supply chain, COVID and supply chain interruptions. So big vulnerabilities. So the idea was that in Michigan, we had a technically trained workforce. There is a Google site in Michigan, and we have a lot of smart people. There's an auto industry there, still doing a lot of cool stuff. We also were at that time starting a cyber range. Merit Networks, I think, was one of the first providers of networking to places in the United States as part of DARPA. I do believe when I was at Purdue in graduate school, Merit probably provided our internet. They were going to spin up a cyber range. So the idea was we could take some of this already trained workforce in Michigan, send them through the cyber range, train them up more, and then they would be available to help in the event of a cyber emergency. However, training for a 100-year event is difficult to do. Like if you tell me to create a group, train them up in preparation for an event like a generator going out, we used as the example scenario. Some of you know Michigan has two parts, right? We have the mitten that's down here, and then this other part up here. And everybody has a map of Michigan built-in, or almost everybody has a built-in map of Michigan. And Wisconsin is over here. It actually touches the UP, the Upper Peninsula, where there's a gap between the Lower Peninsula and the Upper Peninsula. So if we have somebody that gets affected, I'm going to put my hand down now. If we have somebody that gets affected in the Upper Peninsula, people in Wisconsin are closer to it. So that sort of doesn't make sense that we're only in Michigan. So we have some things to address. We already had some people in Michigan who were all overqualified. Like if you had a SANS cert, you were overqualified for what the range was going to be able to do. Also, we figured out that local governments, the people that supply the wherewithal for people to go about their lives without thinking about it, they're woefully unprepared. All right. And I will demonstrate that. So we have a lot of people that I'm getting some feedback, I think, the sound people. So what do? We find out we have this great idea that we're going to protect against big stuff. We find out the little stuff is really vulnerable. And so then the question is, what are we going to do with that? Well, I look to my heroes, and Mr. Rogers is one of my heroes. Mr. Rogers is a legitimate badass. You might not know that. I don't care if you've seen the movie. I have not. But I know this about Mr. Rogers because I am an ordained elder in the Presbyterian Church. I don't go very much anymore, but I know about the Presbyterian Church polity. Mr. Rogers was a minister in the Presbyterian Church, and the way that he did that, like, I don't care about your religion, he defined a target. He said that we are missing the way that things happen in the Presbyterian Church is a group of people come together and they say, we need a minister, please send us one. And the Presbyterian Church has a bunch of them, they send one. Mr. Rogers went to the Presbyterian Church and he said, look, you have a group of people that are never going to be able to ask you for help. It's children. They are not competent to ask for help, but we need to minister to them. And so he got that created as a defined congregation. He made a change in how we understand the people that need help from that church. And again, I don't care about that, but he defined something. He saw a need. He defined it, got it codified, and made it happen. And if you have not heard of Mr. Rogers yet, I'm surprised. So what do we do then? We look for the people that do the helping, and we help them. We train the trainers, and we build a more resilient social infrastructure. So in Michigan, and again, I'm talking about my state. You can take this and apply it to your own. There's differences. Every state is different. We have 2,500 local public entities. That includes counties, towns, townships, school districts, that sort of thing. 2,500. All of these entities have some sort of IT infrastructure for providing services. It may not be very much, they got something. And this is a phrase that I also picked up from the I Am the Cavalry, target rich, cyber poor. If you look at that curve probably, it doesn't matter the counties. You can see in Michigan, as you can guess, there's Detroit, Lansing, Ann Arbor, Kalamazoo. I'm not even reading those, but if you can name a city in in Michigan, it's over on the left because all the rest of this is rural communities. And think about who is the IT guy or girl, but it probably is mostly guys at this point. So who is the IT staff supporting these counties on the right? It might be the IT staff in another county. Might not be anybody. If they have somebody, it might be the person that did the best in the high school math class because they didn't have a computer science class. And those people are still protecting their neighbors who have to file marriage licenses, they have to file property deeds, they may be dependent on local governments to get their child support check, their food stamps, all of that sort of thing. So these people's lives really suck if their local government gets whacked. And it doesn't have to be a fancy 0-day malware thing. All it has to be is to lock up their computers. All they have to do is to click on something it shouldn't have. So I hope you're scared. So in 2013, there was the official creation of the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. And I say that was the official creation because that was the first reference I could find of it on YouTube. There is actually a picture or a video of Governor Snyder talking about the idea of creating this cyber civilian corps. They did it in collaboration with Merit Networks, who had the cyber range. In 2015, the state took over responsibility for the cyber corps because Merit essentially was not able to provide sufficiently exciting training. And thinking back, I don't know if it was a good idea to do that, but that's what happened. I should mention that the guy who was responsible for making that possible, Christian Kopaxi, just passed away recently. Christian really did as much as anybody to make the MIC3 happen, so I want to recognize him. Christian was the one that enabled us to have SANS training the first year. And you can imagine when the government starts up a group of hackers, if somebody came to you and said, hey, we're from the government, we want to teach you how to hack, you're going to laugh. Christian was the one that made it credible for us to say, we're from the government and we want to teach you how to hack so you can protect the infrastructure. The first class we did was SANS Security 504, which is the beginning incident response class. Once we did that, we had credibility and we began to attract members. I will say that I don't know that SANS training is necessary now or even desirable, but at the time that was really helpful. We got permission to deploy in either an emergency or an official incident. But you remember, I mentioned that local entities are vulnerable. It doesn't take getting attacked by a nation state to cause problems. In 2017, it was not me, somebody recognized that we probably needed legal coverage. And we had a legal analyst put together a law. It's actually a pretty simple law, and I would never encourage anybody to go messing around reading legal documents unless you're having trouble sleeping. But you could look up the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act. It's about 4 pages. There's a page of definitions, and it really is pretty bare bones in terms of defining what we have to do. And it gives us the ability to have an advisory board to define our own rules to operate kind of how we want, just have oversight. I got a cough. Okay, so we have the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act that was then amended in 2019. In the original of the Michigan Cyber Civilian Act, as you can imagine, the legislature decided that we don't want convicted felons going out messing around with other people's computers. And as an aside, I'll tell you that the law does provide for safe harbor. If people tell us about stuff, we're covered by NDAs. So people can tell us about stuff and it's not subject to FOIA. So we can talk to people freely and be exposed to anything. But the legislature didn't want us to have felons going out and looking at the Criminal Justice Information System, or CJIS, which you might hear about if you get into this. So we have to have a federal background check, criminal background check, if you want to be a member. We had a member that did something in his youth. I don't know what it was, but he has a record that was expunged, but a federal FBI criminal background check picks up expunged stuff. So this was the guy. So this is the story. You know that when a governor signs something into law, they often do a photo op if they're proud of it. They have people stand behind them. They have they have photographers, and so Governor Snyder was going to sign this bill into law. We were all excited. We had members on call to go stand behind him for the photo op, and we got the call with about 15 minutes to go. And he was in Lansing. We have members all around the state, so there was no way we could get anybody there except for this one guy who had been a member since Merit started back in 2015. So he offered to go. He stood behind the governor along with a bunch of the governor's staff and I think random people they pulled from the sidewalk. So the governor signed it, handed him the pen. He goes away. We start putting the legislation into effect, doing background checks. This guy fails. And that we said some words that I won't repeat here. So we had to figure out what to do. And I have a motto for the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. If we have to restrict access, then we must also create an on-ramp. So we started the process of amending legislation. We now have the ability to have advisors. So if you fail the background check, you can appeal to the advisory board and you can be accepted as an advisor. And I want to call it Blank's amendment, but I don't really want to talk about anybody's criminal history. But we do have an amendment now, so we can handle that also. And I think that shows that we are doing the right thing. We're trying to expand, we're trying to do things in a controlled fashion, but also expand it in a controlled fashion. In 2009, we also, in the amendment, it defined an incident to include the existence of a vulnerability. That's really huge, because that means you don't have to get whacked for us to help you. And I'm speaking of you as local governments. The existence of a vulnerability is enough. And you know that, if you don't know, now you do, CISA has a catalog of known exploited vulnerabilities. So we could, if we knew how to do this, look at all of our local governments in the state of Michigan, do a vulnerability scan, find out for that top known exploited vulnerability, who's got that vulnerabilities, and go out and help them fix it. We haven't actually initiated that, but that would be the obvious next step. In 2019, we started a program called Cyber Partners. Cyber Partners is the proactive counterpart to the Cyber Civilian Corps. The Cyber Civilian Corps only gets activated when something happens. The Cyber Partners is about protection. We now have 64 members. Most of them are either CISSP or GCIH or both. Applicants must have 2 years of experience in IR or forensics, 1 foundational security certification, and we're kind of broad on this. Basically, a certification will do. Security Plus seems like sort of baseline. Demonstrated knowledge, we have some technical tests you have to pass, and employer support for up to 10 days of participation. That's 6 days of training if we do a SANS course, 1 or 2 exercises that would be a day thing. A community volunteering, weekends are possible if we're on a response. But this 10 days does not necessarily include any responses. And you do have to pass a federal background check. Benefits to the Corps, you get training and professional development you wouldn't otherwise get. We do have significant workforce development help. The employers receive the benefit of trained employees. You know, many employers can't afford these several $1,000s to send their employees to SANS or other training. And as I said, we are not now using SANS, and I don't see the need to right now, but there's other things. But you still do get really good training. The MIC3 is officially included now. If you look up online the state of Michigan's cyber disruption response plan, in the last bit, at the highest levels, you'll see the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps included. And we do have the possibility of participating in the National Guard's Cyber Shield exercise. We've tried to do that in the past. COVID happened. Again, I will be happy to talk to anybody about this. I presented on this at the National Governors Association. And if you want to know more about this, there was a paper that was put together called Re-envisioning State Cyber Response Capabilities, the Roles of Volunteers. I'll put a link in the chat when I get offline, or in the Discord when I get back to my computer online. This is the training that we have done. We started with, like I said, 504, which is the incident response process. We then did 510, which is monitoring, know your network. In order to know what's wrong on a network, you have to be able to know what normal is. Then we did network forensics, which is detecting evil instead of normal. Love that class. Phil Hagen came on his one wheel and taught us. After that, we skipped SANS, did something besides SANS. We did Security Onion and Chris Sanders' investigative theory class. And anybody familiar with Chris Sanders? You should totally, if you don't know Chris, I believe Chris is the wisest person in information security. Totally. His investigative theory class, if you have technical debt in your organization, rather than go take the vendor training, I suggest look, if Chris is still teaching this, he's got some issues he's dealing with, but if Chris is still teaching this in person, I believe if you bring in investigative theory and have your analysts go through it for a couple of days, it will teach them to think in a different way or a better way. Analysts make all kinds of mistakes by getting too into one way of thinking and going too far down the rabbit hole. So this is a really great course. I highly recommend it. Right now, we are using Rangeforce as our sort of on-demand class. If you haven't heard of Rangeforce, they're worth checking out. It is different from SANS. There's no live presentation stuff. It's all read and do exercises. But the exercises are very good. It's a fairly new company. I think they're in their A round of financing. So look into them. And of course, BHS and Anti-Sci-Fi. We have a lot of people that participate. Wisconsin has done, I've spent some time in Wisconsin in the past month because their organization is about as mature as ours. They have some cool training as well. They develop their own. The benefits, so here's where we are with the MIC3. Workforce development, I said 85% of our members have changed jobs in the past 2 years. That's good things. This is not people getting fired and having to find another job. This is people I have had. So here's another anecdote. I have a member who does not have a college degree. He works the night shift at a manufacturing plant. But like many people, he figured out that, he got really interested in IT. So he's helped small businesses and family members set up websites and think about their security. And he got interested in cybersecurity. I hooked him up with doing QA for SANS On Demand. He took some SANS classes. He now has, I think, 4 SANS certs. He still worked at manufacturing on third shift, and they won't hire him in cybersecurity because he doesn't have it, or they wouldn't, because he didn't have a cybersecurity degree. So he went out as a volunteer and responded to some incidents. He's gotten interviewed for IT director jobs at local governments, where his own employer won't hire him. He's got job offers. Now the situation is employers changed, and I think he's going to have an offer. And I'm nothing is going to make me happier than seeing this guy get hired in cybersecurity. But that happens because of our organization. We're starting to get involved in K through 12. I happen to love corrupting the youth. Merit has had a high school cyber challenge. I think they're going to stop that this year, but we're going to pick up some others. Cyber Patriot, if you do anything with high school cyber kind of stuff, Cyber Patriot is awesome. And if you know of another good program, please come see me afterwards. I want to put it on the list and see if we can get some structure around it, because I have people that would like to participate. It's just very difficult with timing. So the challenges want to get started in the fall when kids are getting back to school. And it's just, I've tried to do this. Kids have soccer and chess club. It's just really difficult. So I want to work harder on this. We also have general civic involvement. We have some of our people that are adjunct professors. We've got a reserve deputy, and we do have a grant from Department of Homeland Security to work on election security. And this is actually the Cyber Partners side of the house that has partnered with a marketing company to develop some posters that we're going to send out to county clerks and have the county clerks be able to educate voters. So when they come and say, well, what about this? What about that? You don't check this. Here are the vulnerabilities. They'll have a good way to say, no, this is a secure system, and this is why. This is cybersecurity. This is the bedrock of the institutions that provide the stability so that we can do the cybersecurity that supports banks and stuff, right? This is social and civic infrastructure. Also, we have many of our members are parents. And if I get them involved, they start thinking cybersecurity daily. Their kids are more secure. And people like me, I'm going to be 66 on Sunday. And, my mom's in a nursing home. She's not that much older than me. So I'm really concerned that we have smart kids coming along, because I'm going to need somebody to take care of me in my dotage. So to become a member, this is the process. You create a Michigan MI login ID. Everything in Michigan starts with MI because that's the state abbreviation, and it's pronounced my. We're very possessive in Michigan. So you create a My login ID. which gives you access to state services. Many states are using this kind of thing now. You access the MIC3 app via micybercore.org. And if you want to, you can go to micybercore.org and look at that. I'll ask you not to, well, it's a hassle if you don't want to apply, so don't get a My Login ID. You do tests. We have 5 tests. You pass the network fundamentals class, which is ports and protocols. You get access to the basic tests of IR and forensics. You pass the basic, you get access to the advanced. You have to pass 4 of the 5 tests. There's 5 tests, you have to pass 4 or 5. Then, if you have the technical expertise, you sign an NDA, send us your resume, give us your employer support form, do fingerprints, and then we give you a michigan.gov email. It's a bunch of steps, but it happens. We have monthly meetings and training, currently Range Force, and some face-to-face meetings. We have in the past been sponsors of GERCON, and shout out to everybody at GERCON this week. This year, we have a different procurement person in the procurement department who read the contract differently and said, we can't do this, so we can't be a sponsor of GERCON. So until that procurement person gets promoted, I guess we won't be a sponsor of GERCON, but I am submitting recommendations for that procurement person to get promoted. We did a cybersecurity symposium in the Upper Peninsula, and I will say that I have some requests from people up in that sparsely populated area to become members, and they may not be able to. And what I'm encouraging them to do is to develop a club. You know about the DEF CON clubs. There's DC, whatever your area code is. And I think there's DerbyCon or subgroups now by area code. Go ahead and make one of those, get people together, and then reach out to other groups like that. We'll form a network. There's no reason that the MIC3, which is a state-sponsored organization, can't learn from non-state-sponsored organizations. We can't send non-accredited people out to do work, but if we start working with them, that's how you get your foot in the door. Deployment, when a local government gets whacked, when they see something, they say something, they call 1-877-MY-CYBER. The Michigan Cyber Command Center, that's MC3. They got there first, so we had to add an I to ours. They're MC3. This is state police. We work closely with them. When they get a call, the Cyber Command Center calls me and says, we have the beginnings of an incident. It's in this part of the state. It is on-prem exchange, or it's ransomware, or something like that. And I will send out an alert to our members and say, we may get a request for service from this part of the state for this kind of thing. Let me know if you can respond. And then we do a 3-way handshake to request service. This is one of the disadvantages of having an official organization, because we have to do this officially and establish liability. If I have talked to some people that just go respond, and they do it informally, and we want to take advantage of that ability without getting ourselves in trouble. So, and our response targets generally are local governments, which are similar to small and medium-sized business. They'll have 200 to 300 endpoints and a dozen virtual servers-ish, no MFA, or they wouldn't be calling us, maturity level of 0. So with our members, we have the possibility of deploying for 7 days. Right now, we have legislative support to reimburse expenses. We have not done that because we're just in early development. If it was an issue, we'd figure out a way to do it. But I have members that are so excited to go out and help somebody and to be in a crisis situation that they'll go out and sleep in their car overnight, you know, because working at your regular employer is pretty boring sometimes. I mentioned that we started Cyber Partners. I'm going to blast through this. Cyber Partners does not really have restrictions on membership. If you are a public entity, a non-commercial entity, you can be a member. And the goal is prevention, enhancing the response capabilities by putting them in residence there at the local entity and allowing people to exchange information across the state. After 3 years of Cyber Partners, you can see where we are located. You can see on the map there, most people are located, you don't know, but I'll tell you where the red is. That's also population areas. And you can see up in the Upper Peninsulas, We have 3 MIC3 members in the Upper Peninsula, maybe 4, which is proportionally consistent with the population of Michigan. But if I've only got 3 people up there, it's not very well covered, even though there are hardly any. There's more mosquitoes than people up there. So here's the thing. It's a team sport. You have to get everybody involved. And this is advice to people like sort of working at the state level. This is, we have Department of State Police, who is our cyber command. And our cyber command guys are actually really, I love working with them. They really downplay the law enforcement side of things. They're more cyber people, so they're cool. So we've got the National Guard. We have Air and Army National Guard in Michigan. DTMB is the Department of Technology, Management, and Budget, which is the executive department where I work. We've got DOJ, because we work closely with FBI. We have an FBI field office in Detroit, and we have a guy who used to work for the State Police Cyber Command Center who I can call. I got his phone number in my cell phone. So he's at the FBI now. Our CISA rep for our region also used to work for the Cyber Command Center. Kelly Goldblatt. She was a student intern for the Michigan State Police and got hired at CISA. So she's the best CISA rep. I don't know who yours is, but my CISA rep is the best. And we do have the couple of weeks, Jen Easterly is coming to our governor's summit, and I don't think she's going to hand out Rubik's Cubes. And DHS, which is our relationship for election security. And I think I'm getting close to the end, which is good because I'm going to tell you about the other cyber response teams I know about. Wisconsin's, as I say, Lieutenant Colonel Sarah Frater is amazing. I have worked, I was over there. We're going to be collaborating. If you want to get in touch with them, let me know. I think they're awesome. The way that they don't require background checks, they require InfraGard membership, and InfraGard does the background checks. And I'm really jealous of that. We should have thought of that. Training is required for deployment, but they have their own training. It's very closely tied with DOD. They do their training at the Armed Forces Resource Center in Madison, which is amazing. Ohio has a cyber reserve, which is, again, heavily connected to their military department. Texas has what they call a volunteer incident response team. Texas has a military department, and apparently the military department objected to calling it a corps. So it's just a team. Texas is a little different. We've also had discussions with Indiana, Hawaii. I'm still waiting. Hawaii actually came to visit us, and they have not yet invited us to go back out. I'm really annoyed about that. But we had hosted from Hawaii, Virginia, Georgia, Florida, Louisiana, and Wisconsin also have expressed interest. And right now, like next week, I have a meeting with combined members from the National Governors Association and the Center for Internet Security's MSISAC, because we've been doing this locally with Michigan, and there are other states who have gone on and done some things. But you see, there's only about 10 states that have experience. The NGA and MSISAC are going to become a resource center because the other 40 states are really getting interested because they're actually hearing that cyber is a thing. So here's you remember, this is about resilience and building social resilience. And I want you to remember that though we are hackers, hacking takes place not just in cybersecurity. You start hacking when you're little. So meet people where they are to create social infrastructure. This is when on January 8th, 2020, 2 days after January 6th, I got a call. We used to use the Michigan's volunteer registry for the Michigan Cyber Civilian Corps. So on January 8th, I got a call from my local health department saying, hey, would you like to do something good for the community? We're going to start giving vaccines. It was when the COVID vaccines were rolling out. And like I said, I live in Kalamazoo. I used to work at Pfizer. There's a sterile manufacturing plant in Kalamazoo or in Portage, which is next to Pfizer. And when the trucks started rolling with the vaccine, I'm going to choke up. When the trucks started rolling, we were so proud. So I volunteered to go help give vaccinations at the local place like this. And while I was there, I had to move people from like the corner back there over to a table here. So I went and got those airport things from Amazon. It was great. And I ended up spending 231 hours. They put me on the cover of the incident response plan. So I'm kind of proud of that. I had to wear tights because we have a lot of Islamic citizens in Michigan, and so they didn't want to see my knees, but it was real hot in there. The other one is that's my dance class. These are my kids. That's me on the left, my teacher, and all of my kids. So you have to start corrupting kids when they're young. Any questions? This little girl is the one that was creating the hostile living environment for the Shih Tzu.
And we can probably take
now. This is Nutcracker picture.
we can take
Yes,
this
sir.
one question down here, and then we can maybe do some
And I'll-
Wacom Q&A.
You can, yeah, I'll be here. How often are we activated is the question. Not often enough. So activated right now requires an incident, and we could be used much more often. The Wisconsin group, there's one thing I'm working with the Wisconsin group, because they don't have to have an official activation. They just get a call and they ask people. We've been activated probably a dozen times now. So enough, but not as much as we could be to provide good. That's going to change soon. Thank you all for coming. I go out and do good things.